Hey there, welcome to Build 2, where we dive in a little deeper. The way this is going to work out, I'm going to show you a lot of footage that did not make the final cut of the real popular big channel for people that just want to watch something kind of entertaining and a little bit sciencey. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty, and I'm just going to do a play-by-play, sort of talk you through it kind of thing. So let's get into it. The sanding portion, I want to start out with that. So obviously 3D prints, I'll do another video on my 3D prints and getting the heater all set up and everything. But once I got those printed out, you can see I did body filler and sanded them up. If you've ever done any kind of auto body, it's no different than that. You got a chip or a scratch or a dent or something that you're going to fill with body filler and then sand it down smooth. I probably started out at 120, worked up to 400 grit. I don't think you need to go that high of grit. I mean, come on, there's no scratches or anything that are going to show through the carbon fiber, but some people may think so. It's just not necessary to get all that smooth. But let's look through the materials that come in, at least the Composite Envisions vacuum bagging kit. So obviously the first layer that's going to go on is the carbon fiber. That's what's going to be left on the part when you peel everything else away. The next layer is AirTech Bleeder Lease B. Look in the fine print, this is peel ply is what they call it. And this is this magical stuff that even though you get it totally soaked with resin and resin is going to go through it, when it's all said and done, you can peel this right off. It peels off, this stuff peels off pretty easily. Apparently the different types of peel ply leave varying amounts of texture and are easier or harder to peel off. This stuff was great, came off just fine. Moving on, the next layer after that is, speed through this, is this perforated release film. I just called it the release film. And it's kind of like the peel ply, but it just doesn't stick to it goes on the outside of the peel ply, and it's perforated to allow the resin to find its way out. The resin's going to go through the peel ply, of course, but this is another layer to kind of help separate things from the carbon fiber itself and try to not leave as much of an imprint on it kind of thing, and separate the next layer from it. But you'll notice, like when you look at the videos, you'll see a bunch of little pockets as it's pumping down, little spots of moisture coming through and getting the outer layers wet, and there's kind of a pattern of holes in this stuff that the resin is soaking through. That's what you're seeing is this release film. All right, next on top of the release film is basically, my wife does a lot of quilting, or used to anyway, and this is just like quilting batting. You could probably use regular batting from the fabric store and it would work fine. But this stuff is cheap, a big roll of it, and you want multiple layers of this. It's really soaking up any of the resin that doesn't stay in the carbon fiber, eventually finds its way into this. And if this soaks it all up, then you don't have to worry about it getting into everything else, which is ideal. It also allows the vacuum, so you're only going to have your vacuum port on one place on your bag, and this thing allows the vacuum, it gives you this little gap to make sure the vacuum finds every edge of the part. That's why you want to make sure everything is covered all from edge to edge in that breather fabric, because it's breathing. It's going to breathe the air out as well as soak up the resin. And then lastly, the nylons, basically nylon bag that goes over the outside. This is the last step, is the nylon that goes on the outside. And then of course you put that little yellow sticky tape to make sure you're sealing it up to basically make it a complete bag. All right, so I did not want to waste any fabric at all, but I didn't want to waste my nice 3D prints that I had a bunch of time into. So it's like, you know what? I know I'm going to learn something doing this the first time. We're going to make some scrap parts, and I'm going to use some scrap 3D prints is what I used as some smaller parts. And you can see I'm laying them out and taping around it. This is another thing. I want to say that blue tape, I watched some other videos where people said, yeah, lay down some tape and cut through the tape, and that way the edges of your carbon fiber are not going to get frayed. By my last blade, I got rid of that tape, and it may have been, I think it may have been causing some of the issues that I was having. When The tape is on there to keep the edges from fraying, and it helps with that. But as you're manipulating the carbon fiber fabric, if you fold it in any one spot or get a wrinkle in there, the tape makes it kind of hold the wrinkle, in my personal experience. So I eventually decided at the end, I'm not going to mess with the tape, and I'm just going to cut it really carefully and try not to manipulate it in a way that makes the fibers come flying out of there. So I got the carbon fiber cut, and now I'm cutting out the green peel ply fabric, a little bit bigger size than that, and then the, what are we calling it? The release fabric on the outside of that. It isn't really fabric, I mean, it's a release film. And then the breather fabric after that, nice big piece of that. I should have gone with more than one layer. I didn't. You'll see why in a second here. Now I'm laying out just some extra plastic that I had. You can see I laid plastic over the entire sheet of plywood, like 3/4 inch. I highly recommend that, just laying out a nice smooth surface that you're going to do everything on. Covered it with some just plastic from the hardware store for, you know, painter's plastic for drop cloth kind of stuff. But then I laid an extra layer down that I could just dispose of when I was done. So I'm getting everything ready so that when I've got the resin, which by the way has a pot life to it, it's going to cure and you're going to run out of time. You want to have all that fabric cut out ahead of time. So you can see I've laid it out. I'm laying out the, I spread a layer of, by the way, Tech Ingredients has some really good videos on this of him doing his own rotor blades for drones, and that's a lot of where I got some of the ideas, but you'll notice I deviated significantly with the 3D prints and did the vacuum bagging thing. So you can be sure to check out his stuff before you actually do anything. You might want to do it the way he did it. So, and this follows exactly what he was doing, is pouring out the resin and then laying the fabric on top of it using this Bubble Buster roller, which does not come in the vacuum bagging kit, by the way. It's a little extra. It's, you know, it's really cheap. So get that Bubble Buster and you can roll the fabric into the resin, lay your next layer over there, and if you have to, pour some resin on top of it. Roll it all around, make sure everything's nice and wet, and then you can see it was such a small part, I just laid it down there, put some extra reinforcing layers where I wanted it, laid it down, folded it up just like you're making a burrito or a soft taco or something like that, fired up the vacuum pump, and that's it. And we let it sit for 5 hours and we're good to go. That vacuum port ended up leaving a bunch of marks where it was pulling, you know, it's pulling air, it's pulling moisture and everything. I didn't end up having any resin pull up inside the tubes, which was great. The more, you know, I had the more breather fabric you use, the less resin is going to try to suck up inside of there because it's going to get soaked up in the breather fabric, and it's cheap, so why not? Putting that right on the part, it left a lot of marks on the first one. So on the second one, I really layered it up, went with like 3 layers and then maybe a couple of extra layers on top of that. So I want to say I had like 5 layers of breather fabric alone directly under the vacuum port on this one, and it still ended up, as you'll see, it still ended up leaving some marks. Pump the thing down, again, let it sit for 5 hours, then I can turn the pump off, and I come back here the next day and just start hacking everything up. Just grab some scissors, cut the whole thing out, peel it open. You can see that, you know, there's that breather fabric, or the, I'm sorry, breather, the release film, and then there's how easy the peel ply comes off. It's really nice. Ta-da! But you can see, look at, just look at that plus sign there. I don't know, it looks like a looks like a reticle from a site or something. That it just, that's where it pulled a vacuum and sucked everything up. And there, you read online, there's any number of causes of this, but I elected to, I read a tip online just like, hey, just take that breather port and just put it off to the side. Extend your breather fabric off the edge of the part and hang it way over there. And that way you can't possibly have this little sucking hickey of a spot where the vacuum pulled on there. Because yeah, doesn't look good. Oh, that must even be the second That's my first, second part. No, that is my first part. Anyway, you can see all those wrinkles. Not good. Oh, this is the second one. Yeah, look at that, all that breather fabric I put on there. Big, thick, hefty layer of it. Peel it back. Come on, Quint, show us what you got. Hey, that's way better. Look at that. Of course, I put the breather on the other side. Show us the other side. Yeah, look how huge improvement that is. And then you can see the suction, I'll say hickey mark from the vacuum port looks way better on this side. So maybe I just needed more layers of it. Maybe I was putting too much resin into the fabric. I know I did that the least on the last one. So you can imagine if you have a bunch of resin or maybe air pockets or something underneath that, that it would be pulling that stuff through and be sucking it up. But I also didn't smooth out the plastic and the breather fabric as much, and I applied the vacuum in a hurry. Like I just won't give it everything all at once. And I kind of wonder with the resin trying to bleed its way through all those layers, if applying the vacuum more slowly allows it to kind of gently work its way through rather than, it's a pretty sizable vacuum pump, pretty impressive vacuum pump for such a small part like this, and may have just made it worse. So here's the first real blade cutting out the carbon fiber, and you notice I cut out one layer to go kind of in line with it and the second layer to go at a 45 so you get fibers in all directions. Of course, cutting out all those other layers that we talked about previously, and it's just everything's just much bigger. And there's my nice fixture that I built up to support this thing, and I'm adding those extra layers of carbon around the critical strength points. And mixing the resin, rather than using the marks on the side of the pail, I just did it by weight. I think it's easier. Painted some of the resin onto the blade to give it something to stick to. And then, of course, rolling all that resin into these. This was really scary, by the way, putting all that resin into all that carbon fiber. You can see I trimmed it a little bit after I laid it on there because I could tell I had extra. And then I'm just packing the layers on there because I don't want this thing to not work at all. And you can see how much I left hanging off the edge where I put the vacuum port. And I just pumped the whole thing down. And it came out decent, but you can see those ripples on both sides, and they're undesirable. That's one of the concerns with carbon fiber and any composites, is that how bad is a wrinkle? What is it going to do? Is it going to make my giant commercial wind turbine blade fail? And there's a lot of modeling out there just trying to predict that kind of stuff. But it's good enough, great for a first real blade try. And obviously, from watching the big video on QuintBUILDs that it ended up working out great. So yeah, not too shabby. Well, let's jump into the second one, having all that experience now. And you can see again, I'm cutting this one out at a 45. And then I cut the other one out at a straight in alignment with the roll, and then cutting the extra layers and a bunch of. Now, some of these I did a little bit. Everything prior to this I was doing like everything was like a taco. This one I made the outer layers more like a sandwich. Again, my fixture, laying those pieces on. Although you'll see, I didn't let my contact cement cure long enough, and so you see the layer pop up on the lead edge of the blade there because I didn't let the contact cement cure long enough. Just you get kind of frantic when you're doing this stuff. Now the resin was curing on me. It was like, oh no. So it made it tougher to spread it out, but it also held it in place, and I ended up with some little wrinkles right in the middle of that. There was one little wrinkle in the blade that I couldn't straighten out, and I think that's what stayed in there. But here I'm basically giving this thing a massage as the vacuum. I'll bleed the vacuum on a little bit more, massage it, spreading out that stuff to get rid of the wrinkles. And to see how it came out, I'm gonna let you get my words right after I opened it and get my reaction showing how it came out with everything I did, learning, practicing on parts, and this is the second blade. So here you go. Check it out. This thing looks so much better. There's hardly any wrinkles at all. You get this nice smooth carbon fiber surface, and just one little wrinkle here and a couple really tiny ones on the back.
But overall, this is a really nice part. Looks way better than the first one. And just practice makes perfect, man. You got to learn what it takes. And I say if I did a third one, I mean, who knows? But these are going to work great. These are really going to work great.
And obviously, having watched the big successful video that was made with the finished turbine blades, you know it was a success. Something that I really want to emphasize, though, before I made my first carbon fiber part with this stuff, I could have passed a test, like checking off this type of fabric uses this type of resin. I could have told you all the facts, but man, the BUILD acronym, A Better Understanding Involves Learning and Doing, wow. This really brought it home for me that after I had done it, I couldn't really put my finger on anything that I had learned. Like, I still knew the same information, but I was just way more accomplished just having done it. When you do something, you just learn and understand more, which I wish people would get more hands-on. But yeah, so it really brought that home for me. It was really cool. Thought I'd share that. So hopefully this was helpful to somebody that is looking to do some kind of vacuum bagging. There's lots of ways to work with carbon fiber and other composites, even fiberglass. But this is what I did. Hopefully you learned something from it and maybe enjoyed watching. See you in the next video.